Jong-un over the North Korea's appointment to the board of the World Health Organization. What is going on with Trump and Kim Jong-un? Why does he keep making these kinds of comments about the North Korean dictator?
Well, your guess is as good as mine. I have, in the spirit of our times, tweeted about this and said this is one more piece of evidence why Donald Trump is not fit to be president. This is no joking matter. Kim Jong-un is a cruel dictator. His people are among the most impoverished in the world. He's building nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles intended to be able to hit the United States and intimidate his regional neighbors. This is not somebody you pal around with. It just shows Trump has no real understanding of the depth of the threat that Kim Jong-un poses, and it's why 4 more years of Trump in control of foreign policy would be extraordinarily dangerous for the United States.
And I want to get to that, but I remember covering Trump's summit with Kim Jong-un in Singapore. You were there. Did you see any early warning signs of this kind of strange friendship that they seem to have?
Well, we saw warning signs in Trump's reaction to these letters that Kim sent to him before the Singapore summit and then after. Now, there's no doubt in my mind these letters were written by some Communist Party hack in the Agitprop Bureau of the North Korean Workers' Party. But they were filled with phrases like Your Excellency and things like that. Trump just thought they were love letters. I mean, I shook my head. There wasn't much more I could do. I just don't think he understands what he's up against when he faces the hard men of contemporary international affairs, Kim Jong-un, Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping. He just doesn't know what room he's in.
And this weekend, let's switch to Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky told the Wall Street Journal Ukraine is ready to launch its much-anticipated counteroffensive in the war against Russia. In your view, how should the U.S. assist Ukraine in this counteroffensive, and how much support should they get?
Well, I think we've done a lot. From my perspective, we haven't done enough, but I think there's more that we can help as the battle goes on. I do think one important point to make here is not to overhype the potential outcome. Certainly, there's nothing in the performance of Russian combat arms over the past almost 16 months to give any evidence that they'll do a good job in defending against the Ukrainian attack. And certainly, we've put a lot of effort into training the Ukrainians. But it's a very dangerous period because if the Ukrainians do well, there will be some in Europe who'll say, okay, time to stop all this and negotiate. And if the Ukrainians don't do well, some of those same people will say, look, this has gone on long enough. So I think managing expectations here is important. I understand why Zelensky wants to increase the morale of his fighters, and that's obviously the right thing to do. But I don't think we ought to conclude we're within weeks of this war ending. I think that's a very, very unlikely outcome of this offensive.
And let me get to some campaign politics as it relates to Ukraine. I'm just wondering what you thought of these comments from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis that came in response to a questionnaire from then Fox host Tucker Carlson last March. DeSantis said, while the U.S. has many vital national interests securing our borders, addressing the crisis of readiness within our military, achieving energy and security and independence, and checking the economic, cultural, and military power of the Chinese Communist Party, becoming further entangled in a territorial dispute between Ukraine and Russia is not one of them. There's been some talk about how he's backed away from those comments, Ambassador, but does the next Republican presidential nominee need to be a steadfast supporter of Ukraine in its fight for its survival? What did you make of those comments from DeSantis?
Well, I said at the time I was disappointed, but I do believe in the prospect of redemption, so I think there's still hope. Look, this is not a territorial dispute. This was an unprovoked act of aggression. It's been bedrock American policy since 1945 that peace and stability on the continent of Europe are in America's vital interest. That's why we formed NATO and did many other things. This attack on Ukraine represented obviously an assault on that country, bordered by many NATO countries, allies, treaty allies of the United States. That's one strategic interest. Second, the Russian rationale here is basically that the terms on which the Soviet Union broke up, they no longer accept, which means that every other former republic of the Soviet Union is in danger of the same treatment as Ukraine received, like Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, also NATO allies. And finally, just very quickly, the Chinese are watching this conflict more than anybody else. This is not isolated. We just talked about Chinese provocations near Taiwan. If the United States and the West don't defend Ukraine here, I think the Chinese leadership in Beijing could well conclude there's no way we'll come to Taiwan assistance. So there are important American interests worldwide at stake in how we handle Ukraine, and I hope the Republican nominee for president will be able to make that point convincingly.
And before too long, we're going to be getting to debates in the Republican Party primary process. The RNC has apparently adopted rules that say in order to participate in the upcoming presidential debates, you have to pledge to support the eventual nominee. If that's Trump, would you do that if you were one of these candidates? I know you've talked about that you'll be a candidate. Do you plan on participating in these debates, and would you sign that pledge? Would you sign on to that pledge?
Well, I'm still thinking about it, and no, I wouldn't sign that pledge. I'm not going to support Donald Trump. This is not a matter of party loyalty. I think he did enormous damage to the country and certainly to the Republican Party in the 4 years he served. A second term, I think, but all of that is repairable, and I think it is being repaired. But 4 more years of Donald Trump could do significant permanent damage to the country and the Republican Party. That's why I think everybody who's in this race now should not spend their time picking away at each other. They've got to convince Republican primary voters that the job one here is to prevent Trump from being renominated.
And yesterday we had former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson on the program, and he said that he would, as a part of that condition to participate in the debates, yes, say he would support Trump as the eventual nominee. Do you think that's a mistake, and do you think it's a mistake for these other candidates in the field to sign on to that pledge? Should they resist that?
Well, I have a lot of respect for Asa. Everybody's got to make up their own mind. I didn't vote for Trump in 2020. I didn't vote for Joe Biden either. I live in Maryland. I wrote in the name of a conservative Republican because there weren't any conservative Republicans on the 2020 ballot.
All right, Ambassador John